Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. And I am here with Ryan Nelson, who is I don't know if you're a best-selling author, but you're a selling author. I know I have like 3 copies of your books or something like that. What's your book again here, Ryan?
You bought 3? I only sold 3.
Yeah. Well, you are a selling author. And what's the title of your book here, Ryan, again?
Your Fiscal Physical.
And not to be confused with The Fiscal Physical, which is this podcast, right? Yep. So that was well thought out as far as keeping it non-confusing for our listeners there. But definitely, jokes aside, please check out Ryan's book. You can find it on Amazon. Really breaks down a lot of these concepts that people might not even think about, and being able to have that resource and fire it open, like I think is huge for sure. So it's actually funny. I was at work the other day, and I was in a meeting. I work remotely, and I had your book like sitting behind me.
Okay.
And we were redoing our office or redecorating. And your book was sitting there. It was turned backwards, I think.
Yeah.
So it was just a picture of you.
Oh, that's awesome.
There, and the guy was like, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's my buddy Ryan. He wrote this book." And he's like, "Cool." Like he's like, "Is he your idol or something?" I was like, "No, he's just, well, kind of."
Yeah.
So it was
That's awesome.
a great conversation starter. I recommended it to him for sure. So as far as this podcast goes, let's dive into this here. We are going to cover, I don't want to say my favorite topic or one that really resonated with me, but it is a really interesting topic just in general.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about compound interest today. So
Perfect.
I'm sure everybody is super excited about that, but hopefully by the end of this, you will be, because it's an amazing thing. So I'm going to stop talking here, Ryan, and let you turn it all over as far as what compound interest is, difference between potentially simple interest, and everything about it. Let's do it.
Perfect. What out of curiosity, what is compound interest to you, and why does it make you so excited?
Yeah, when I learned about compound interest and like building upon, like I think it was with you when I started this investment journey with you and my wife, and you showed us like a graph of like money. You're making money on money that you're, I don't know if I'm explaining.
Yeah.
Building money on top of other money that you've already made, like over the course of like, and so
Absolutely.
You're able to, what I make this year, potentially, I have that, and then the next year I'm building not only upon my original investment, but upon that other money as well. And over the course of time, which is a big piece of that, how much that just accelerates the interest that you gain on something, versus probably everybody has a bank account of some sort that gains like 0.001 or something like that. And yes, but like having something that has a tangible amount of compound interest that builds up to, and over the course of time, I just felt it was really cool. So
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
in my brain it does, but maybe you can break it down for
Absolutely. So yeah, I think of it as gaining interest on your interest, right? So the common example, let's use easy math here, right?
Please do.
So let's say we start with $10,000 and we're getting a 10% rate of return. Is that a fair rate of return? I don't know. You could argue probably not, but again, it makes our math really simple, and the financial concept or mathematical concept stays the same. So if we have $10,000 invested and we get 10% rate of return on year one, we're gonna get 10% of $10,000. That's $1,000, right? So on year one, we have $1,000. Now, though, in year two, we now have $11,000 invested. So now as we get $10,000 of 11,000, I mean 10%, sorry, of 11,000, we're not just going to make $1,000 like we did in year one. In year two, we're actually going to make $1,100. So we got that $1,000 similar to year one, but now that extra $100 is, again, that interest on interest. It's the interest on the $1,000 we made last year, right? And then at the end of year two, at that point, we'd have $12,100. So 10% interest on $12,100 is about $1,200, right? So now you're gaining, in year one, you made $1,000. In year 2, you made 1,100. In year 3, you made 1,200, right? And it keeps growing and compounding, right? And so that's really what we mean by compounding interest. The cool thing about compounding interest is it's an exponential function. So what that means is if you think about a graph, it kind of looks like a hockey stick, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a hockey stick laying on the ground with the bottom of the hockey stick pointing up, right? And so it kind of stays flat, and then just goes up really steep. And that's what we would refer to as like an exponential function. And so, yeah, in years 1, we make $1,000. In year 2, we make $1,100. Oh, you made an extra $100, Ryan. What is that a big deal, right? Like, it's growing a little bit. It feels kind of flat, right? But so I want to use a quick example here. So if we start with $10,000 and we get 10% annual rate of return, what do you think the account balance would be in 10 years?
Let's see. In 10 years, you're probably looking at $17,000.
Yeah, good guess. So, that would be if we think about generating the 10% on the, it'd be like $1,000 every year, a little bit, right? So that would put us at.
Oh, I see. Oh, gotcha. Yes.
So that would put us at least $20,000,
right?
And then probably be a little bit more than $20,000, so it grows to $25,000.
Okay, cool. I love that you humored me with that. Good guess, Aaron. It sounded like my mom when I was like paint a finger painting. She's like, "Wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah,
hang this on the fridge." Yeah.
So as we think about that, it was a good guess. You're in the order. You're like in the right ballpark, right?
Sure.
But so we know it would be okay. We at the end of 10 years, it would be $25,000. A little bit more than that. It'd be closer actually to $26,000. But so first 10 years, we go from $10,000 to 20. We'll call it $26,000. So we made about $16,000 there. What do you think that account balance would be at the end of 20 years? So not adding any money to this or anything, just continuing to grow at 10%. So we made $16,000 about it.
Sure. So you made $16,000. So you probably, let's go with $44,000.
Cool. Yeah, it would have actually grown to $67,000.
Oh, okay.
So in the first 10 years, you would have grown about $16,000. The second 10 years, you would have made closer to, $45,000. Mm-hmm. What do you think the next 10 years, so going to 30 from $67,000, what do you think it would be after another 10 years of growth?
Well, just thinking of how you made that hockey stick reference there, I would feel like it's going to go up from there. So let's go big. Let's go 175.
Ooh, 174.
Oh, man.
Yeah, good
Even
guess.
the blind squirrel gets an acorn once in a while.
Right?
Yeah.
And then in the interest of time, I'll say, so at the end of 40 years, well, you want to take a stab at it again?
No.
Okay. You can't get
I can't get any better than that.
So then at the end of 40 years, another 10 years, it would go from 174,000 to 452,000.
Wow.
So think about that. The first 10 years, we made about $16,000. We never added a penny to this.
Right.
It was just $10,000 invested. First 10 years, we made about $16,000. So it went from 10 to 26. Next 10 years, we made about $42,000. So it went from 26 to 67. Next 10 years, we made over 100,000. So it went from 67 to 174. Wow. And then the next 10 years, we made almost $300,000. It went up to $452,000. And if you think about it, like in year 41, you're now making 10% of $452,000. So you're making $45,000.
Right.
In
just
year
in
41.
Interest. Just.
So that's $45,000. Yeah. You started with only $10,000.
Yeah.
You're now making $45,000 a year just in interest because you're getting the interest on the interest, and your interest, it just compounded, grew so much that now your nest egg is so big that now the interest you're getting is a multiple, it's like almost 4.5 times bigger than your whole original investment. So that's just a quick demonstration on compounding itself. But let's use another example here. So let's take two individuals. This is an example I love to use. So we'll say there's we'll just call them Ben and Joey. So Ben, he starts investing young. He starts investing at age 21. He invests about $200 a month, $2,400 a year. So not huge numbers here, but he invests, a couple $100 a month, so $2,400 a year. Starts at age 21, but he stops at age 30. So for whatever reason, he can only invest for 9 years. So he ends up putting over those 9 years, he ends up contributing about $21,600. So he contributes for 9 years. But now the $21,600 that he has invested, it does get to continue to grow. So he invests from 21 to 30, but now at age 30, he has this 21 grand invested and it's going to continue to grow, right? So that's Ben. So he starts young, but has to stop saving young as well. And then there's Joey. Joey starts when Ben stops. So Joey starts investing at age 30, but he's diligent about it for his whole career. So he retires at age 67 and he invests during that whole 37-year window. So Joey puts in the same amount of money, $200 a month or $2,400 a year, and he invests from age 30 to age 67. So 37 years. So he put in a total of like $88,000 because he's adding for 37 years instead of Ben, the first guy, was only putting in for 9 years, right? So one starts younger, starts at 21, invests for 9 years, puts in $2,400 a year. Or Joey starts a little later, but is more diligent about doing it over his career. So he does it for 37 years, puts in the same amount, $2,400 a year. What's your best guess at? So do you think Ben has more money because he started earlier? Let's fast forward to now age 67. Do you think Ben has more money because he started earlier? Do you think Joey has more money because he was more consistent over time? Or do you think it's a trick question and they have the exact same amount? And I'll tell you again, let's keep using that 10% rate of return just to make our math really easy. Again, you could argue that's not realistic rate of return to plan for, but for easy math.
And I feel like just over with this conversation, which kind of how I feel like it's got to be Joey. Like I feel like Joey should have more money than Ben because he's been doing it for a longer.
And Joey's the second. Started later, invested for 37 years.
Yeah, exactly, and invested for 37 years overall, and was that consistency. Is that? I think that makes sense to me in my mind, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Good guess.
Okay.
That means you're wrong.
Okay. Perfect. But so how am I wrong?
Yeah, exactly. So what's crazy is, Ben, when he started investing, he only invested for 9 years. But so his account balance at age 30, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood. I don't even have this math in front of me, but it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30,000 because he put in 21,000.
Sure.
But he also got some growth during that time period, right?
Right.
So he put in 21,000, maybe with the growth, maybe he's at 30,000. So now Ben has 30,000. This is the young investor, or the investor who started young.
Right.
He has 30,000 in an account. If it's generating 10% a year, his compounding interest now is 10% of 30,000. He has $3,000 basically going in every year just on the money he's already made, right? Joey is putting in $2,400 a year, so Ben's putting in, or Ben's interest is like $3,000 a year. Joey's only putting in $2,400 a year every year. So while you think about that and you say, God, Joey's putting in 37 years more, like putting in a lot more. It's like, well, Ben's money's working for him harder than that. All of those 37 years that Joey put in $2,400, Ben already set his account up where Ben's account is basically growing at $3,000 a year for him. And so it's impossible for Joey to catch up to Ben because the only Joey would have to save more money to catch up to Ben. Ben's already at a point where his compounding interest is higher than the amounts Joey is putting in, right?
Wow. That's wild. He kind of gets to like the blast off rate of the hockey stick like quicker.
Right.
Like I suppose like as far as wow.
Right. So what's interesting here is it would be impossible for Joey to catch Ben if they started saving the same amount, if they were saving the same amount, because Ben's account, when we talk about like putting your money to work for you, Ben's account is going to work for him.
Right.
Ben's account itself is generating more interest every year than Joey is saving and adding, right? And so as you fast forward, you get to like year, when they're both, 50 years old, it's like, well, now Ben's account, might be, like a rough order of magnitude, like at probably closer to 60. Ben's account would be like $1 million.
Wow.
So Ben's account is kicking off $100,000 a year now.
Sure.
10% interest. Whereas Joey's account would be much smaller, probably closer to 700,000. So Joey's account is still putting off 70,000 plus the 2,400 he's putting in. But so still, you can see every year now Ben's account is growing by 100,000.
Yeah.
Joey's account's growing by 72,000.
Wow.
So every year they continue to separate more and more and more. Ben's money is continuing to grow at a faster pace. So the further out you go, it's not like, even though Joey's still putting more money in, it's not that Joey would be catching up to Ben. Ben is still moving, his account balance is still growing at a faster rate than Joey's is. So the longer the time period is, the bigger or further ahead Ben would be. So hopefully that's a decent demonstration of compounding interest. The point is, it's the money. It is the interest on your interest. So the money you have invested, the interest that it's generating, adding to your principal balance, and then generating more and more and more. And the reason why I like this example is Ben's now effectively, if you think of his compounding, the interest he's generated is now large enough every year that it's actually surpassing what maybe another investor would be totally saving.
Right. No, that's wild, man, to think. I didn't think I could like compound interest anymore, but you've proved me wrong as far as this goes here.
There you go.
And I think that's a great way to put it. And it kind of harkens back to episode 29 of time in the market.
Absolutely.
As well, too, because being able that over that at that point, I mean, he would, if he started at age 21, he's technically been invested for 46 years by the time that he actually is retired. So just those extra years versus, maybe 30, 35 years just in general, how much you could see how much different that is and how much that it just makes me think I wish I would have gotten in earlier, but you can only control what you can control at this point.
Yep, exactly right.
But cool. And just before we wrap up here, Ron, I heard this quote the other day, and really in just kind of a weird spot. And I was like, oh, I think this is really applicable to this episode here. So this quote's from Albert Einstein. He said, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." And I really thought that was just like that. Obviously, a famous mathematician and all these different things, and that really resonated with me because if you can, and that's hopefully what we're trying to bring to this podcast is if you can understand at least the concept of it and be like, wow, you know what? Even if I just get $200 in a month, for example, into something that I'm going to let sit for 35, 40 years, whatever it might be, how much that will potentially, if it's done correctly, and you don't know if you're going to get 10% or whatever, but generally you're going to get some growth. Most of the time you would hope so over the course of
average, at least.
On average over the course of 30, 35 years. Being able to get something in there and understanding what that's doing for you and interest on interest and seeing how that graph grows, huge. I think.
And he brings up an interesting point there is we're talking about the benefits of it from an investment standpoint. This works exactly the opposite when you're, say, taking a loan, right?
Yep.
And you're effectively paying interest, right? So he talks about both the positive side, which is the market growth you can get by investing, which is what we primarily address today. But then he also mentions the negative side of it, where you can sort of lose out to this factor as well if you're taking loans and paying compounding interest on, say, a mortgage, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Definitely you want to be on the right side of the compounding interest. You want to be on the one receiving it, not the one paying it.
Yep. No doubt, for sure. So awesome, Ryan. Well, I really appreciate it, man. That was fun. That was a good time. I'm buzzing now as far as this goes here.
I love it.
We'll go ahead and pause here. I'll calm down a little bit, and then we'll talk about some personal stuff here.
Let's
for
do
sure.
it.
So.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to the personal section of the Fiscal Physical podcast. Myself and Ryan, we're sitting here. We're just reminiscing on things, thinking about different things that we've done in our lives here. And one question that comes to mind for me, or to ask you here, Ryan, is, and there's probably several of these here, but what has been your proudest moment of your life so far? I know it's always hard to kind of quantify that as things are, lose luster over time or they gain over time. But what would you say at this point you would say your proudest moment is so far?
Yeah, that's so hard. I really don't know. But yeah, I mean, definitely I would say launching Alchemy Wealth Management. I guess what probably constitutes like being the most proud was probably something that took a lot of work and then achieving it.
Definitely.
So I'd say some of those moments for me would be launching Alchemy Wealth Management with a ton of work, and it's been very successful. So I'm proud of that. I won 20 under 40, which is recognizing 20 individuals for their like professional and philanthropic efforts under the age of 40. So winning that was a lot of work as well. Obviously, publishing the book, Your Fiscal Physical, was a tremendous amount of work. So those would be all sort of business related. Completing my first Ironman, which is a triathlon, a long triathlon. Definitely, that took a lot of work. I was proud of that as well. So yeah, that'd be just a number of, I guess, a couple of ones that I'd be up there on the list of most proud. What about you?
Yeah, and it's a good point to kind of, there's different things that like I go through stages of my life where I'm like, oh wow, I'm really proud of that, and then I'm like, okay, I'm moving on to the next thing here too. So two things specifically stand out for me, and you mentioned like that things that take a lot of work, or I also think that sometimes things that take a lot of like guts to do, if you will. And for myself, like I think about when I moved down to Reno in 2013.
Yeah, that would be big.
Moving out of the state of Idaho where I spent most of my life, like literally had like $1,100 in my bank account, just graduated college, had an internship that was paying like $11 an hour down here that didn't start for like 3 weeks. I had all my belongings in my car. I had my mattress folded up in my back seat and my twin mattress at the time. And I literally I was just driving down to Reno and I was like, well, we'll see what happens as far as this goes. And so I think about that, and I think about how much it's changed my life. And like, I feel like for the better, and I'm really happy with where my life has become. So I'm pretty proud of that. And then the other one I have to say is, tricking my wife into marrying me as well.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a pretty big one, I'd have to say too. So I
love it. Not
sure how that actually worked out as it did, but I'm pretty proud of that overall. So
I love it.
Yeah, well, I love the variance we have on different things for sure.
On a slightly different note, let's get you a quick trivia question here.
Oh man, my man! All right.
In the spirit of compounding interest,
of course.
So any idea what Warren Buffett's net worth is? Approximately.
Oh man, 50 billion.
Yeah, good guess. That means no.
Yeah,
it's about 140 billion.
Okay,
so 140 billion.
Oh,
man. I think he's 93 years old. So 140 billion. He's 93 years old. Let's say, when do you think he made his first? When do you think? How old do you think he was when he made his first 100 billion?
Made his first 100 billion. Probably spirit of competitors interest. Let's go with 75 years old.
Yeah, good guess.
Darn it.
I actually don't have the exact number here, but it looks like it was probably around age 90.
Oh wow.
Yeah. When do you think he made about 50 billion?
50 billion, probably 85.
Looks like it would be about age 80-ish.
Okay.
Around age 80. When do you think he made his first billion?
His first billion. Probably age 60.
Yeah, that's really good. Around 55-ish, probably 54. Wow. So heck, when do you think he made his first million?
First million at 50?
30.
30?
So this is how this system ramps up, this exponential growth I'm talking about.
Whoa.
So a lot of people consider Warren Buffett the greatest investor of all time. Why he's widely considered the greatest investor of all time, I think some people misconstrue like, oh, he gets these incredible returns or whatever. My personal belief is that the reason why he is one of the richest men in the world is his time horizon, the amount of time he's been invested, not because of necessarily his market return. So most people, they start saving for retirement at like age 50,
sure,
and then they retire at age 65. So they're invested for like 15 to 20, 30 years, right? He started investing when he was 14. He's now 93. So he's been investing for 80 years. So if you think about this exponential function, he really gets to take advantage of that hockey stick where it's really ramping up, right? So if you think about this, so he started investing, he became a millionaire at age 30, right? It took him, so to make a million, he started investing at 14. It took him 16 years to become a millionaire. And then it took him, what did I say, about 54, 55 to become a billionaire. So
another 20 something years.
Yeah. And then from there, from a billionaire, so it took him 50 something years total, or it took him like 40 something years total to become a billionaire. And then another 40 years later, he went from 1 billion to 140 billion.
Yeah.
So the first 40 years he made 1 billion. The next 40 years, he made 140 billion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this exponential function where you can just start seeing this really ramp up. And I mean, It's insane. So it really just goes to show you that's the power of exponential or compounding growth, where you really start seeing these numbers grow fast at the end. I think some people think he was like a billionaire his entire life. He wasn't. He was in his 50s before he became a billionaire. But because he's in his 90s and still investing 40 years later, that's how it went from 1 billion to 140 billion.
That is crazy. And the thing, I mean, the only thing that's going to stop him is death, I suppose. I mean, if at this point, I mean, every year, if you hypothetically say that 10% return,
sure,
I get a quick 14 billion every year. Like,
yep, right.
Like just at least at minimum, that's wild.
So you can see how it just keeps growing exponentially. Yeah. It's crazy.
That is wild. Well, on that note,
so that means if he makes 14 billion a year, that'd be $1 billion a month. What did I say? It took him 50 years to make it, or 40 years to make his first billion, and now he's making $1 billion a month. So, who knows what he's really making, but
it's hard to say.
Rough order of magnitude.
Yeah, that is wild, man. But awesome, Ryan. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great episode. I know that this is going to be one of my favorites that I recommend to people to go check it out, and we'll sign off with the plug here. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.